But yeah, I'm very excited to have a new book coming out, but it's very scary because, it's like when you have a child, it comes out in the world, you hope it's well received. You hope that people like your little darling.
So we're going to ask Bonnie some questions. Let me just give an intro. If some of you ever were at my store, I think Bonnie Jo was there a couple times for
Should
signings.
we say this is Randall?
No,
Okay.
it's all right. And we're just delighted to have her, and it's great to see her back again. And she has participated in the Rally of Writers in Lansing, Michigan for several years now.
Yeah, I think this is about the 5th time I've done it. So.
And I want to ask you some of the corny, old-fashioned ones right off the bat. First, let me preface that with there is some talk, and I may have started it,
No way.
that we think you write somewhat like Flannery O'Connor because of the nature of your characters, who are some, I guess the polite way to say is not mainstream characters, but becoming more so, I think. And that we think you write better than Flannery O'Connor.
Ooh, this is good. Did you guys get together and decide
Did
this?
I say that loud enough? But number one, I'd like to ask you, how'd you get started writing? I mean, what was the impetus that kicked you over that little edge?
Well, and remind me to come back to Flannery O'Connor because I have actually pondered that. What is the big difference? There is a big difference between the two of us. But let's, as far as getting started writing, I guess I was always trying to write from the time I was a kid. I was always, I wrote for the high school newspaper. I wrote columns. I've always tried to write letters and I tried to write stories, but stories are so hard and so easy to get frustrated writing them, and they don't go well often. And if you're a discerning reader at all, you often know how bad your own stories are. And so I tried to write, and every couple of years I would try to be a writer again, and then I would decide I wasn't very good, and then I figured my time was better spent off having adventures. So I started a bicycle tour company, and I did that for a few years and rode my bicycle through Russia and the Baltics and the Balkans, and had drank a lot, and I was a single girl, so had a lot of fun. And then I tried to write again, and then it was really difficult, and it was hard going. And then so I decided to study mathematics, because I thought, well, at least if I study mathematics, I'll know something. So I went to graduate school in mathematics and kept trying to write on the side, and pretty soon I found I was weeping all the time. I don't know, do you guys feel that way about math? Sometimes.
Very much.
Yeah. I was just weeping all the time while I was doing my proofs, and my fine mathematics PhD advisor told me, why don't you go take a writing class? So I went across the campus, carried my pencil case across the campus, and took a class with Jamie Gordon, National Book Award winner. And she changed my life and said, why don't you come over to the dark side and join our program? So that I finally gave myself permission to take writing seriously, and it has gone fairly well since then. It's a slow process, this writing. Success comes only very slowly.
But we've watched your career, and it has been steady.
I've kept working. I mean, there's a couple of important realizations I've had in writing, and one of them has been that writing is about hard work. Writing is not so much about being brilliant. It's not even so much about being creative, but it's about caring enough about how good it is, and then being willing to put the time in to make it as good as it needs to be.
And then kick it out in front of the public or an editor.
Well, and then to share it with a small group of friends who can save me from sending it into the world in case it's not ready. We need our writer friends to let us know how things are going and whether a piece is ready. And usually my writer friends have been very wise about helping me get a piece going in the right direction if it wasn't. And then after that, then finally sending it into the world. It's a danger to send a piece into the world too soon, because you only have one chance with each editor. So, and sometimes I wait too long. I've been working on a ghost story for about 2 years, and I kind of think, well, maybe I ought to at least send this to a friend, because maybe I'll send it to you, Randy.
How many, I guess people would be familiar with this term, I think, but how many of your babies have you had to kill off?
None of them.
Well, that's excellent.
And this is odd. I'm not sure what this says about my personality, but I have been married for 24 years. And so I sort of stick with things. And I have one story in my collection, American Salvage, that I worked on off and on for 24 years.
Which one is it?
It's called Bringing Belle Home.
Yep.
And I wrote it when I first got out of college, and it wasn't very good, and I knew it, but I couldn't leave it. Every couple of years I've had to pick it up again, take another look at it, and say, what is it? And every time I picked it up, the story still had something to say to me, and so I couldn't give up on it. I knew that I had to keep working on it. And so finally, when I was putting this collection together, initially I didn't have the story in this collection, but it was such a perfect fit. A story about a relationship between a violent person and a drug abusing person. And I knew it had to go in here, so I just put all my energy into it, and I found the story. I found what the story had to do.
We're glad you did. Now, another corny question.
Makes me tired just thinking about it.
Sorry. Who inspired you the most as a writer for you to become a writer?
I worry about that question, because I used to always say Flannery O'Connor, John Steinbeck, and Faulkner, because I feel a real kinship with them. But I'm not sure I'm being honest, because I admire them so much, but there wasn't a connection necessarily there with I want to do that. I think my true inspirations for telling stories were my mother, who likes to drink and tell funny stories, and then my grandfather, her father, who likes to tell very sober stories with very serious stuff in them. And I saw this battle of storytelling going on my whole life. They would tell the same story and they'd fight about how the story should go. Both of them loving to tell stories. And so I think I saw something in that, this urgency of being the one to tell the story. And so I kind of wanted to jump into that fray, and I wanted to be the one to tell the story too. But I've never been a good verbal storyteller, so I had to do this other thing. And I've noticed very few people are both good verbal storytellers and on the paper storytellers. I don't know, maybe there are some people you can think of. Mark Twain is an obvious exception. But I think it is very different skills.
Before we jump on Flannery O'Connor, what would you recommend, or what was your first publication? Where did you put your first work? Where was it placed?
I think I might have had a few kind of tiny little publications that I don't even remember what they were, like friends doing things. My first real publication was with a publication, I think it was called Rust Belt. And it was a really important thing. This was while I was studying mathematics, and I still had to write. And I made this discovery, this hard work discovery, of that a story wasn't just something you just wrote and then you were finished. A story was a thing you lived with and lived in and worked on. And so I was working on the story, and it was from my first collection. It was called Sleeping Sickness. And I worked this story, and pretty hard, I thought, and then I sent it out to a few places, and I sent it out to this guy, and he gave me one of those really generous rejections. And he said, this is strong, and this other thing is not strong, and this other thing you don't even need. The whole tree fort scene, you don't need it. It was just this revelation. I don't need the tree fort scene. Maybe there's a lot of things I don't need, and it was a real eye-opening thing. And then so I worked, and that was the first time that this work was a real pleasure, because I'm just gonna make this thing really good, and I'm gonna wake up every day and work on the same damn story every day, and I'm just gonna do this, and instead of thinking in terms of finishing it. And then I sent it to the guy, and he accepted it and printed it. And it was a literary magazine. It was this, and I'm embarrassed, I can't remember what it was called. It might have been the Rust Belt issue. Oh, Kiosk. It was a magazine called Kiosk that no longer exists, unfortunately. I think it was the University of Pittsburgh. And it was, I think this was the Rust Belt issue, so that's how somehow I fit into that one. But it really, like that, and in looking back, that's what I hope for all my students now. I hope an editor takes extra minute to look at their work and to give them a little feedback, and then
It helps.
it works. They really take the advice to heart, and then they have this relationship with the work they've done. So it was just, and at the time I didn't know that's how it happened. That was what I did right before I took this writing class. So I had a little of this publishing experience, just a tiny bit, right? And I think I might not have even allowed myself to take a writing class unless I'd had that little bit of, I didn't know better, that it's normal to not have publications. It's perfectly fine. I didn't know it at the time.
I've got a two